Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we have a look at the 1969 film Assignment Terror, with many other titles. This is episode 399. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. We are the usual members of the Castle of Horror. Jason, with us from Austin, is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Ringo-nominated writer and creator of indie comic Halloween Man, available now at Global Comics, Drew Edwards. Say hello.
One night only, known as Hombre Lobo.
I love that. Hombre Lobo. I am Hombre Murcielago. And as always, we have color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello, and I have to translate now that Jason's throwing Spanish into the mix. That's not part of the movie. He's Batman, apparently. I'm
Yes.
Batman.
Okay, and look, I am so incredibly excited. I don't
Me
even
too.
know other words, because joining us from the Monster Movie Happy Hour are the entirety of that show, our amazing friends, historical book illustrator David Geister. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Historian Mary Challman. Say hello.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
I am so happy to have you back with us. And historian and raconteur and cocktail wizard, Scott Chesebrouugh. Say hello.
Much too kind. Good evening or
Welcome.
good day.
I have
depending
a
upon when
cocktail
you're
in your
listening.
honor
Yes.
that Dave recommended.
Yeah. We circulated beforehand. Y'all circulated a cocktail recipe, and we made it, and it was named. I don't even know. Was it the Hombre Lobo? What was it called?
No, the Nasty Tonic.
It's the Nashi tonic. Yeah, it's really a sangria and tonic. And you know what? It's pretty lame, but my heart was in the right.
Yummy.
I thought it was great.
Well, I
What
like
is
it too,
the
but
ingredient-
you
What is
know,
the ingredients, Dave?
it's 2 parts sangria, 1 part gin, 2 parts tonic water, and then garnish with maybe a slice of lime and an orange twist. But herein lies the problem. I wanted the sangria, the Spanish part, to represent Nashi, of course. The
Yep.
gin was added in honor of Michael Rennie, who was in the movie that Jason even hasn't had a chance to introduce yet. And somehow, like the sangria, the passionate part is just not coming through strongly enough. And I feel like Paul Nashi didn't quite get his due with this cocktail. So I'm going to have to do a little tweaking at some point.
I
Scott will
enjoy
be
it.
speaking to you.
Yes.
I thought the one that I had a lot of bite to it. I was really happy with it.
Oh, I'm glad.
I think I put more gin in it than you did.
Yes, you named it after Paul Nashi, also known as Jacinto Molina Alvarez, who was the writer of this film. So even though this is not I'm not even sure how many of the werewolf movies Nashi directed, but he was the creator and is sort of the brain master behind this long series of werewolf movies. And he was the screenwriter of this film, in which he plays that character yet again. So he stands out as a guy who in the 60s had created a character and played him in many films. So all right, but before I talk about this movie, when was the last time that we got together? I believe so I was checking. So it seems to me that Scott and Dave, I think you guys were on a show without Mary recently, but Mary, the last time we were all together was episode 329, which was The House of Long Shadow.
Yes, it was quite a while ago, but I remember that conversation so well, and I love that movie. I've watched it a couple times since we've talked about it.
No way. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I feel like we were in the middle of the pandemic, or if not, we were just emerging from it. Because like 2 years ago.
It was. I think that we were still in lockdown.
Yeah.
At some point, or some variation thereof.
Man alive, it's so funny to think about that. My gosh.
It feels like the past 3 years have been a decade.
Right. No, absolutely. And we were just talking about the fact that this is episode 399. So Drew and Julia and Tony were trying to figure out like how many years have we been doing this, and the answer is since 2011. So this is our 12th year of doing this. All right. So I'm so happy that you're here.
It upsets me that you're telling me that 2011 was 12 years ago. That is not okay.
Wait until I tell you about the 80s.
You mean 20 years ago in the
Yes,
80s?
yes.
Right.
Periodically, I pull out pictures from the 80s just because I enjoy saying that's 40 years ago. Okay,
Obsessed me
so
crazy.
I can say so many names for this movie, but let's go with Assignment Terror. Assignment Terror, also known as Dracula versus Frankenstein, also known as The Monsters of Terror, and a few other titles. Like every country it was released in one, if not a couple of other titles, like Operation Terror, Frankenstein versus the Bloodsucker in Denmark. I didn't even know why, and it's so all those titles are misleading. Assignment Terror is actually pretty good. This is a 1969 Spanish, German, Italian horror film directed by Tullio Demichel and Hugo Fregonese, and it is written by Paul Naschy. It is the third in a series of 12 movies that Paul Naschy wrote and starred in, featuring werewolf Waldemir Daninsky, and it stars him, Michael Rennie of The Day the Earth Stood Still, Craig Hill, and Corinne Dorr, and Patty Shepard plays the love interest. And I want to call that out because there's a whole plot where the police detective and one of the women who's been attacked by the werewolf just start dating, and it takes up screen time. It takes up actual screen time just watching them wander around by the river and and which I love. Actually, that's my favorite stuff. So okay, let's get our opening thoughts. Oh, I didn't even talk about what exactly this movie is about. All right. There is no outline of this, so I'm just going to try to do this off the top. Actually, I'm not even going to do it off the top of my head. I'm going to ask one of you guys. Who wants to tell me what this movie's about? Okay, Drew is raising his hand. Drew, what is Assignment Terror about?
It is about space aliens
All
who
right.
have possessed the bodies of dead Earthlings,
Okay.
and they are now resurrecting various monsters so they can figure out how to mass produce them in an effort to take over the world.
Jason just did a spit take while you were describing that, by the way.
I just, I thought that Jaws 4, The Revenge. I thought Jaws 4 was preposterous, because that shark follows them from Cape Cod down to the Florida Keys.
And it roars.
And it roars. But you know what? I've changed my mind. I'm ready to put that one on the shelf of could happen. Okay, let's get our opening thoughts. So Drew, we'll go like this. Try to keep your thoughts down to like 180 seconds, and I won't even have them. I'll just take them into the. So we'll go Drew, Mary, Tony, Scott, Julia, and then I'll go. So Drew, tell us what you think we're supposed to think about this movie.
I can't tell anybody what they're supposed to think. I will tell them what I think. I am a fan of Paul Naschy. I love that these movies exist because they are essentially low rent exploitation, Universal Monsters fan fiction. And we haven't done a whole lot of these. This is the second one that we've done. I don't actually think it's one of the better ones, although it's still a lot of fun. Like yes, it's meandering. Yes, the editing is bad, which I know Tony's gonna get more in depth on. But then there's the ending. Like there's so much of this that I still really like the ending, like everything in the ending of this movie where it's monster on monster violence. Like I unironically love it because this is like the late 60s. This is like a few years away from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And, this came out the same year as Rosemary's Baby. And they're doing House of Dracula. They're basically doing a Universal Monster Rally. And I love it for that. So, warts and all, I am a Paul Naschy fan. So, I know that other people are going to have other feelings. These are mine. I have others. We'll get into it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, this is my feelings. Yes. Okay, Mary. I really actually we haven't talked about this. I have no idea how you feel about this movie.
I've been following along our verbose group chat.
Yes.
I was very entertained today. I think this movie is. I'm with Drew on this one. I loved it. It's a popcorn movie. It's schlocky. It is, I think your description of it as a fanfic is absolutely spot on. I've done a little bit of reading about Paul Naschy, who I also was very interested in, and I love that he was really like kind of like a super fan, where he met Boris Karloff at one point, where he loved old school horror and basically wanted to live out that fantasy, and he got to. And I'm so glad that he did, because it, resulted in these films, which I think are really just, honestly, just fucking fun.
It's funny when you think of it that way, that Paul Naschy left a mark. Like people know who he is. He left a mark, just like exactly like you would hope any of us could, being super fans, right? So that is.
And I also think that we don't see a lot of sort of monster movies, at least popular monster movies, coming out of Spain, which I think is kind of interesting too. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it, just his background and how that played into all this. And I also think that the whole storyline is not bad, quite frankly.
Well, that is one of the topics, so I can't wait to get into that. Tony, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's an entertaining movie. I like Paul Naschy, and I like all the homage to the Monster Rally movies. Like and some of it just direct, like, hey, here's that scene from Monster Rally movie that we like. So, but it is, while Drew did outline the plot, and that plot exists, the editing makes that plot fairly incomprehensible in parts, and it will jump cut from just like, here's jump cut. Oh, here's something dark. By the way, here we're in the park, everybody. Here's the park. You like parks? Here we go. Like, it's just, it felt like sometimes like they had all the reels stacked and they went, whoa, and then just dumped them like the cakes and what's it, Electric Company or Sesame Street?
Yeah. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
No, it was like 100. I can't remember. The guy has a lot of cakes. You can't walk down the stairs. Yes.
And also it seems that the aliens are powered. That their real power is the most annoying noises you can possibly hear on the earth. Just constantly. Yes. And I guess I'm mindful of that because I was watching it late at night and I was like, oh, you having to turn this down because everything has the most annoying beep or sound possible that you could Foley in. But I mean, it is entertaining, and Drew's totally right. When monsters are fighting, that stuff's awesome. The idea, and also, we get the whole monster thing. It's like almost kind of Plan 9 homage as well, because you've got aliens coming down, possessing humans, and then unleashing monsters into the world. So there's a lot of like interesting homage that makes this movie. It's got, and it's all about, hey, let's cast a lot of attractive people being attractive in this. But as far as like cohesion goes, but I don't know. Do you need that all the time? I mean,
it's a really solid point.
It's just, but it's not my favorite movie perhaps we've done, but it is entertaining.
Man, if they still had that pizza place in Dallas where you order your pizza and you sit down and they show public domain movies. God, can you imagine watching this movie in a pizza joint? There was also one in San Francisco.
I'd be all over that.
Yes. We should found that right now. We should sell all of our goods. And
I mean, can you just book the draft house?
We can sell all of your goods.
I think at this point you could book the draft house and eat pizza there.
I guess that's true.
You don't have to sell. I'm just saying you don't have to sell everything. Like there are less drastic ways, but maybe not as more hard. Like if you want to go all in, there's a certain.
This is our $1 million idea.
Yeah, I know.
You gotta spend big to win big.
Hey, listener, don't run off and start our public domain horror theater restaurant. Okay, Scott. What about you? What about what feel free to send us in another direction with this.
Well, no, to me it was the comparison to the sort of Monster Rally films, Universal Monster Rally, those films from the 40s, the House of Dracula and House of Frankenstein, and you get all the monsters together. And I should point out, to the credit of this film, 10-year-old Scott, who saw Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, was bitterly disappointed with that film because actual fighting between Frankenstein and the Wolfman is probably like 5 minutes, if that, of screen time. And so at least the monsters fought here. They weren't as cool looking, but okay, at least they're really fighting. I mean, you
Yeah.
got what you paid for. So, but I would say I have an added criticism to the editing. My criticism would be with the soundtrack, such as it is. It's like, okay, was this all public domain music that they got, and they just went, oh well, let's just throw this on here because it'll fit in this situation and this situation. I mean,
Yeah.
like the one that sticks out to me is this sort of, late 60s faux club music that they were like playing at the very end of the movie. I'm like, really? All the monsters have been destroyed and the the aliens plan has been wrecked, and they're playing this like club music, and it's like, does this seem appropriate? And the castle's in flames. It's like, who picked this music for this scene? It's like,
No,
but-
I interrupted you. I'm so sorry.
no.
I'm sorry.
I mean, that's really all I
And
was
I'm
gonna
gonna
say,
double
but-
the time if I keep responding to everything. So,
No,
but I'm making a note. Music.
but what otherwise, I mean, going into it, I knew I've seen the movie before, but I knew even back when I saw it the first time, I knew almost immediately within the first 10 minutes what I was going to get.
Yeah.
Based on how the movie's edited and just how things are done from a technical point of view. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
So anybody who knows anything about film and watches this and has never seen it before, you know what you're getting within the first 10 minutes. So
Yeah.
I'll get into more specific
No, that's excellent.
observations
I
and
think that's
criticisms later.
That's excellent. And in fact, bear that in your mind about what that means, like what you're getting when you start watching this, because I want to come back to that a little bit. So if I don't specifically do it, just shout it out later.
Sure.
Julia, I'm always astonished that I have forced you to watch any movie, but a movie like this, a haphazardly released Spanish, Italian, German monster movie made in 1969 and released over the next 5 years. I don't know how you wind out here. I mean, this is so welcome. What did you think of this movie?
Well, first of all, when you went through the list of names, you didn't say the original name, which is Los Monstruos del Terror. And I really wish we could have seen it in Spanish with English subtitles, but I could not find it. We couldn't find one.
That's right. We couldn't.
Nice.
So I don't know if
The
you find
dubbed.
it. I will watch it with you.
Yeah. I did not like this film. I'll be honest. It was not. I did not enjoy it. I found it misogynistic and confusing. Like Tony was saying, it's like there was a better script, but somehow it got lost. And so then they were like, well, here's a page. Here's another page. Let's stick these might go together. And it's just, but I think the idea of aliens that just revive a bunch of monsters is kind of clever. So I feel like there's a better film that could have been made, but it was not. Yeah, but I just I don't want to go too much into it because there's
No,
a
that's
lot
good.
to be said, but that's basically where I fall.
I'm so thankful to hear you say all of that, because I think we need a voice where it's like, I don't know. You come back to this, keep this in your mind, Julia, but I wonder if you're saying, is our time well spent watching and then discussing for many hours?
Discussing anything with these guys is time well spent.
Well, there you go.
Oh, that's great.
All right. So, David,
Yeah.
please, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to save you a lot of time here. I'm going to second much of what everybody has said. I have such mixed feelings about this movie, but the fact that I watched it twice in the last 48 hours, which now means I've seen it 3 times in the last year and a half, means that I obviously find something strangely appealing about it. And it may just be that, late 60s vibe. And unlike my dear friend, Scott, I actually rather enjoyed what I assume was a sort of public domain library of or whatever stock music. And one piece of which I might recognize from, shall I say, adult entertainment that I may or may not have been familiar with many years ago.
No kidding. No
Maybe.
kidding.
I may have to do a
I'm
little bit of
shocked.
research. Yeah, I know. I may have to actually research that. But there's obviously plenty to talk about. But at the end of the day, I really kind of enjoyed it. And I'll just let it go at that because I look forward to where the conversation is going to go.
Was the adult entertainment called Pan and Skin? Because that was
Wah, wah, wah.
that was a
called
that was a movie
Dracula
that-
Loves Frankenstein. Giggity, giggity, giggity.
That's what it was.
Julia,
beauti-
actually, go ahead, please.
Oh,
Sorry.
a beautiful queer love story. I'd watch it.
Dracula loves Frankenstein. That does sound like something that would star like Udo Kier and be made with
It really does.
That's I have Dracula versus Emmanuel. I really do. You know, we were talking about how in that movie, Bruce Lee conquers the hell or whatever it was called. I can't remember the name of it. It's where Bruce Lee dies, and then he teams up with. I'm not making this up. He teams up with Popeye and
Yes.
and Kane from Kung Fu.
Yep.
He battles the forces of darkness, who are represented for reasons that are lost to me by James Bond and Emmanuel, and you know, and
Wow.
Dracula. And,
Well, it's
and-
also is there like a Clint Eastwood Man with No Name character?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Popeye's
Yeah.
also that is the movie that I would suggest if you were going to do a double feature, as I've often been doing lately, is that movie, which is just as incomprehensible in some ways and just as entertaining. So
It sounds like whoever wrote that movie was like on psychedelics or something when they wrote it.
That's an example of a movie that you can make if you're making a movie in a country that really doesn't care about foreign
Copyright.
copyrights.
Yeah.
yeah.
You're not going to get sued by Eon Productions. Like, nobody cares. And sure, have James Bond and Popeye and Emmanuel and Dracula. It's fine.
I love it.
And fantastic. But I just wanted to mention, I own a copy of Dracula versus Emmanuel, which is an actual movie.
Wow.
That is not nearly as good as El Monstruos del Terror. So here we go. The first topic, as we kind of work our way through this, is I just want to know like what and this is good for us as a group, right? Is what is this for? Because this plot, you know, is preposterous, right? It's aliens have come to Earth to take over famous monsters, and so there are two themes that I can work out. One is that our passions are our strengths, and the other is that, well, the other theme is kind of torture. I mean, that like Paul Naschy, I think, likes to put in scenes where women are screaming, right? But what I was just kind of wondering about is, like, what is this for? Like, is this a stupid question? And it's okay. You can say, Jason, I don't think this is a
Well,
a
how do you
fruitful
mean what is this for?
I mean, Night of the Living Dead is clearly for us asking what happens if society falls apart, right?
Yes.
And Megan is for us asking what happens if we lose sight of our ethics when we pursue technological answers.
So
to
you're
our
wanting
problems.
to know, is there some sort of subtext or metaphor or
moral. Is
whatever?
there a
I-
moral?
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like I don't know if there really is a moral. I think that the moral is in the production where I think, Drew, you were right on the money. I think that they wanted to make a movie where all these monsters fought and they had to find a way to make that happen. And so aliens are a very convenient plot device.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Which
that
I
I
feel like
think that
Yeah, Tony, what were you gonna say?
I think you're right. Jason, I think I don't know, maybe this might be a forest for the trees kind of moment where I think what this is for is for Paul Naschy as a werewolf to fight other monsters. I think anything past that,
Yeah.
and and there's and women, there's attractive people doing things, and Paul Naschy fights more monsters.
Yeah.
Gets to be a werewolf. I don't think there's I don't think there's an inherent this isn't.
You're saying there's not a
children of men.
there's not a-
Or like,
I would
Not an
add on.
allegory.
I would add on that it's supposed to be entertaining.
there you
You
go.
know,
Exactly.
yeah,
exactly.
like Mary called it a popcorn movie, and that's
She did. That's right.
That's the way. I hate to keep kicking it back to Universal, but does Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein have an agenda other than to entertain? I
No,
mean,
that's
perhaps it does, but like, and that's a better film than this. I'm not saying that it's not, but like, it's okay for something just to be an entertaining yarn. And I think, the sort of Plan 9 from outer space versus the Universal monsters thing is, like Paul Naschy was a grown-up monster kid, and this is him mashing the action figures together.
Sort of.
And it's a love
remarkable,
letter
isn't it?
too, because just even that opening circus part where they take the stake out of the
Yeah, the
Vampire's
vampire.
Heart is directly, I mean, that's like, it's Naschy writing this and going, here's all the stuff I love. I'm going to put all that on the screen and
Yeah.
we're going to do that.
I feel like
And
there's
that's it, you know?
I think that there's like that. I think that begs a couple of interesting follow-up questions. So on the topic of entertainment is like, is something being entertainment enough? And when does it go too far? Because I feel like historically people would watch hangings as entertainment, but
Yeah.
but telling stories as entertainment, even if they don't have a moral, is still like what are the contours of that? And then with that as well, and then going back to Naschy, when is a creator's intention bigger than the product, or more important than the product that they produce?
I don't understand that
Well-
question. What do you mean by that?
That I think that the intention that Naschy had behind creating this film was self-serving, where it was a love letter to his monsters, which I think all of us can relate to in some form or another. But the product that came out of it was, it's a popcorn movie.
Yeah.
It wasn't as I guess his intentions to me feel so much more profound than the absolutely raucous schlock of a film that we watched and enjoyed.
Well, go ahead, Scott. Sorry.
All I was going to say is one of the reasons that the movie is, as I think broadly stated amongst all of us, except maybe Julia, that the movie is, if nothing else, at least mildly entertaining for various reasons. But one area where, and obviously as also brought up, it's not a Universal movie in any way, shape, or form. But one of the reasons that it fails is that you have all these monsters in the movie, depicted in the movie, and none of the actors, including Paul Naschy, I'm afraid, have nearly any of the charisma of any of the actors who portrayed these monsters in the previous Universal films. So you have basically Naschy's the best of the monsters, but most of the other could have been any actor.
Well, I
they're
feel like-
very lusterless. There's nothing to them other than
Right.
sort of a paper tiger sort of thing. It could have been anybody.
But you can say that about any actor in Hollywood now.
Well,
Or almost any actor.
I mean, that's not untrue, but
I feel like-
for this movie, it's like
I think Rennie's doing a good job. I think Rennie is playing a loathsome mad
Right.
scientist alien as well as
I wasn't including him. I'm
That's true.
including just the monsters.
But I
This is
disagree
Rennie's
with
last
you.
movie, just
I
FYI.
disagree with you that like, look, no disrespect to Lon Chaney Jr. because I love the guy, but
Yeah.
like Naschy does have he has a certain physicality, especially in those fight scenes about him. But he's got he was very into bodybuilding. He's like this stocky guy. He looks like one of the early 80s drawings of Wolverine. Like
that's true.
He's
Yeah.
the stocky guy. He's got a certain animalistic charisma about him. And when it comes down to the fight scenes, yes, you're 100% right. None of the makeup, it comes even close to being as good as the Jack Pierce makeup in the original monster films, but his physicality and the way he throws himself into those scenes of being the werewolf, like that shit's good, man.
I mean-
like I'll die on that hill.
Okay, I'm willing to back down a little, but what I would say about that is even though now was it determined that he did write the script for this?
Yes.
Yes.
Because he's not, in my opinion, he's not really given much to work with. Because all the other characters basically say, oh, well, this, Rennie's character basically sets up the description of the character. Oh, this guy was a werewolf and this happened and this happened, this happened. Naschy's character maybe has like less than 10 lines of actual dialogue
Isn't that interesting?
in the entire film. So he doesn't get to do anything except emote and walk around and interact with a female lead and then fight with the other monsters, but that's not much. And
He
I
has-
mean, I have
and he gives
seen,
And I'm
himself more-
perhaps bringing my the fact that I've seen all these other movies. Like to your point, and in fairness to what you're saying, like I am perhaps thinking, because I'm thinking of him in his other werewolf movies, and seeing him where he is a bigger character. That's probably coloring somewhat of my opinion here, but I do think as a physical presence, like like just the scenes, like I think about the scenes when they're in quote unquote Egypt, and they're breaking into the mummy's tomb,
Yes.
and like him in the background with his like James Dean t-shirt on with like the pickaxe. And
Yeah.
just like the way he like he looks there, like like I'm not saying that that's like amazing acting or anything, but he's got a certain like I said, like a certain screen presence about him, and
I don't disagree, and I have seen other films that I think reflect his talents much better than this one. And what I would also say that just as an aside, when I was watching this film, I realized that he reminds me, at least to some degree, of John Belushi.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Yes. Okay.
Oh
No, I'm
my
glad you said
God.
it, because I was having a weird, like, early young John Belushi thing.
Absolutely.
I
Going
think
off my
what's
Jason
funny
and I
about
both said
that,
too. Yeah.
the last time we did a Paul Naschy movie, I think Julia did say
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
Love
It's
it.
inescapable. Yeah, he looks a lot like John Belushi. He does.
Yep.
If John Belushi started pumping iron and stopped doing
Yeah.
so much drugs,
And didn't die. Yeah.
and didn't die.
Right.
That's what I was thinking about, getting back to the question of meaning of it all. Actually, I think it's fair to go, this is exactly what Tony said. It's a monster mash, and that's a thing. In other words, that there are movies you go watch because they're going to have a theme that is an overarching theme, and there are movies that you're going to watch because it's
The
an
movie
experience.
does give you a theme, though. Like they do say that it is
by
about.
the
Yeah,
end,
like
there's definite, and maybe a little on the nose as far as
Oh,
like, how
yeah.
it's delivered, and how whoops, here's what we're here's the
Messages we
moral
will be
after all.
saved
We're
by
gonna yell
our
it.
By love and passion.
our passions.
Yes.
Our
Yes.
passions are what save us. Lead us
Sex,
to emotion.
lust.
Yeah.
and
Well,
the fact
in
is
this case, monsters. This is. I mean, I wonder if they're really like. I wonder if there's a correlation here between Naschy's passion for monsters and him trying to figure out, like, all right, what's the point of this movie?
You have found a good theme. That is a good theme. That's really good. That the love for monsters is equivalent
save the
to
world.
our passions that by leaning into our passions and expressing them in your art, you can actually affect the world in a positive way. That I will
Yeah,
buy.
look at
and if you're from the planet Umu, don't fuck with the Wolfman.
Exactly.
And I want to come back to that. If that were the point of the film only, it would be great. But so much of the film is also women are slaves, and I didn't.
Okay,
that's
talk
what
to me
really
about-
turns me off about this
Yeah,
movie is that I
roll with
keep
that,
thinking.
Julia. Tell me about it.
Well, as you guys are talking, I keep thinking, yeah, but what about, like, you're talking about whoever Naschy or whoever it was interacts with a female lead. I'm like, interacts how? Like these women, the two women are both intended to be both sex slaves and also like lab assistant slaves, and just, I mean, they're tortured, they scream a lot, they really don't have
Patty
much else
Shepard
other point. Mhm.
is just this woman who is the daughter of a professor who knows about monsters, and she gets attacked, so she starts dating the inspector. She's a
Yes,
regular
because
person,
who wouldn't?
right? What I find fascinating about Craig Hill, who plays Inspector Toberman, is that there is nothing that would cause him to invent another facial expression from the one that he is. Like, I don't care what's happening. He looks vaguely concerned if he's like chained up and gonna be ground up or stretched on a rack, or amused, or a woman is kissing him. Same look, no matter what. It is, he makes Roger Moore look like a fantastic actor. I quote Roger Moore. but this man has, and I mean no disrespect. If Greg Hill was your uncle, I'm sure he was a wonderful person, and I'm sorry.
Good luck. Good luck getting out of this one now.
But Julia,
But-
I think that you're
yeah.
right though. But I think whenever it comes to things like this, and I think that we're centering Ralph Nashi in this in a really interesting way, this is his fantasy. And I think that says a lot about him as a person.
Seriously,
what do
the
we
fact
learn
that
about
he
Paul
loves,
Nashi's
the fact that
fantasies?
he loves having these women be tortured with electricity and that they're also sex slaves. I mean, it's just, I don't know. Like I say, so that is just such a
So there is a
huge-
kink on display, is
So
what you're
Paul
saying.
But it's-
Nashi was a power
Yeah.
top. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There-
Yeah.
I-
I mean,
just-
I'm not.
just to be there is one male slave, although I guess he's one of the dead people that are brought back to life, because ultimately he falls in love. Two of them fall in love and he gets killed.
Yes.
But he's not tortured on the other hand.
So that guy's name is Carrion Werner, is the character, Dr. Werner, who was brought back to life from he was an army doctor, he died in war. They brought his body back to life, and now he's
Yes.
falling in love with Ilona. So they're the aliens who are suddenly in fleshy bodies, find themselves attracted to one another. Michael Rennie's freaked out by that, but also can't stop voyeurizing them. The
Yeah.
fetishes are running rampant.
Well, and that's my
Yes.
second problem with the movies that you just described things that I don't remember happening. So I just did not keep track of this plot of this film. I'm like, oh, is that what happened?
That's easily
was-
you could easily be excused for that, Julia. Trust me. I've seen it 3 times now, and I'm still having trouble putting it together.
Yep.
This movie has a lot of what Joe Bob Briggs calls when the story is getting in the way of the plot.
Tell
that's
me
good.
about that.
That's a good. That's good.
It might be the other way around, but anyway, what does that mean?
It
Because
works either way around.
I would like to understand, because I think we can learn from this, right? Why is it hard to remember what happens in this movie? It shouldn't be. Okay, aliens bring back monsters, try to take over the earth. That should not be hard. To
There are
remember.
so many diversions that don't necessarily lead anywhere, or they,
Exactly.
like the love story. The fact that we go from a scene of some horrific moment to the detective and the young woman, walking along
in the park.
in the park, that doesn't go anywhere. I mean, it as much as I enjoyed it, and I really did, because maybe just the weird vibe is partly what I was really enjoying about the movie. Those interruptions kept throwing me off track, so I had trouble keeping the shape of the story in my mind. Does that make sense?
And yeah, and they'll cut back and forth, like the way it's cut together, where we do get that love story, and
Right.
and they'll cut to something, and then okay, well now we're torturing somebody,
Yes.
and now we're gonna go resurrect a monster, and then we're in Egypt. Oh, and then here's this thing where they fall in love, and she's trying to rescue him from prison, and then oh, well, we tortured somebody else, but then now because you were in love, we're going to torture you, and here's some more of that, and then here's the monster, and then oh, well, let's go to the library and find.
It's almost like torture is a
it's
sex scene. It's almost like like how in a porn movie you would cut to a sex scene because you need to get them in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
This movie cuts to torture, which is weird.
Do you
But
want to know
just- but
something
not only
interesting
that-
about? Do you want to know something interesting about Nashi?
Mm.
He was married to the same person for 40 years.
Well, you can be married for a long time.
Oh
and
yeah, I
be-
know, but like and they had 2 kids. I
And
wanna
what,
know
Jason?
they-
And what? Wait, you can be married for a long time. What? What were you gonna say?
I have no idea. I'm not sure where that sentence was going. It doesn't.
Just back away. Just put it down and back away.
Maybe you want to
Frankly-
stop.
Jason, you can get away with this. You could do just like this movie. If you make a really annoying noise right now and just shake a lot, you can just absolve yourself of like, well, it's a cut. Oh,
Well,
I don't know what's going on.
and the other scenes that are in this movie that you would think would have more relevance, but I found pretty boring, were when the inspector wasn't romancing is it the mayor's daughter?
No, it's a
Doesn't-
professor's daughter.
Okay, well, in any
Yeah.
case, when he's actually doing investigating
Yeah.
and he goes to this local bar and he sort of has a couple drinks and watches Rennie across the room have a couple drinks, they're all like the scenes are like boring. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, great. I mean,
Yeah,
you
isn't that
know,
interesting?
What did he drink though? That's what I'm trying to
well,
figure.
and
Yeah,
that's the
vodka.
other. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Although in the first time he's there, he has a scotch and water, but the
Mm.
second time he has vodka, and
See,
I
no,
don't
that just
know.
doesn't track. I'm sorry, you can't.
No. What? From a technical point of view, the vodka he orders comes in a green bottle.
Wow.
I've never ever seen vodka in a green bottle. That doesn't mean it doesn't come in a green bottle.
Keep
But
in mind, Scott's the kind of person who gets upset if they have the wrong buttons on uniforms in movies.
I love
I'm
this.
not
This makes me
upset.
so happy
It's
to
just an
hear.
observation. The other thing, as long as I'm going to be the crank. So the other thing that bothers me, not just in this film, but in other films that do this, is scenes where you were talking about how the doctor Rennie is observing everyone. You know, he's
Yeah.
being voyeuristic. I dislike movies where, now granted he's an alien and they may have alien technology, but all the point of view of the camera, the spy camera, if you will, is the same view that you get from, you know, what are the actual camera shots in the film, or
Yes.
it's like, how did
Yeah.
they get that? How
How
did
did
the
they-
camera get that shot? I mean, it's like, this is a spy camera that he's looking at. How did it get that
There's
shot?
one time when they use that
Aliens.
camera cleverly, which is a weird moment that I wish I'd seen. Honestly, if I saw it this year, I would be happy with it because it's cheap, but it's really effective. Good guy the inspector walks into Michael Rennie's lab. Michael Rennie is fiddling with his science stuff. What I literally don't remember what he's messing with, but he's looking down at his table, and he talks to the inspector through the TV screens.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And
Yes.
that's neat. I mean,
Yeah,
that would be
was
cool.
neat. That was like the whole ring, like it's like a ring camera thing. Also, I thought it was funny that there was always something bubbling in the background of
Yes,
the lab.
Yes, right. The
Well,
lab
I
is
mean,
doing
it's
lab stuff. all the
how
time.
else? Yeah, how else are you going to know it's a mad scientist
Exactly.
lab?
Exactly. And they had the appropriate shades of green and red and blue, which I'm a sucker for. I'm not making fun of it. I actually
No,
love
Oh, I unironically love the set dressing of the
Yeah.
lab. Like
Yep.
I you know, it's there's sparks and, you know, computer
Lots of
screens there
sparks.
just there for the hell of it is.
No, I
near
just
as
want to
can tell.
suggest that, you know, like, because Scott and Mary and I are occasionally called upon to be ologists. And
Yes.
in our labs, if things spark, you get the hell out because everything is going to explode. So I
But
just,
see, that's what I like about these sort of set dressings, where as nefarious as some of this, you know, some of these torture scenes and the abject misogynist, the abject misogyny of it, I still feel like there's a very childish element to this plot or to this story. Where when you see, like when I see a set like that, it's like, oh, this is what like a 12-year-old would imagine like a mad
Mhm.
scientist lab would look like. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
kind of
right,
love
right.
that.
oh, sure.
Very, very sweet.
I mentioned on Twitter, and the post actually got liked by Coop, which made me really happy. But that these movies in some ways are more like live action comic books
Mm.
than, you know, stuff that's actual adaptation of comic books, because there is this sort of
Mhm.
juvenile, you know, like as you just said, like even the perviness about it is this sort of, you know, I'm a kid and, you know, I don't have a full grasp of what I'm doing, but I'm just gonna go with what feels right. And you know, it's also like he's just, you can tell he's very much this love, like right down to the fact that Michael Rennie's character has the same name as Bela Lugosi's mad scientist character in Bride of the Monster.
I don't think I
Like
was aware
that-
of that. That's
Yeah,
No,
it's-
I didn't catch that either.
Yeah, Dr. Varnoff.
You're
And
kidding.
like,
That's really
yeah,
interesting.
so
Okay.
like it, you know, all of that stuff just makes me happy. And I'm not saying that any of your criticisms are wrong, but I get enough of like a dopamine hit from the other stuff,
Yeah,
from like the Easter eggs and everything, that I'm kind of like, I don't fucking care about the deficiencies. It just makes me happy.
Drew,
Well,
Drew,
that's
do you
the
feel like
reverse of me because I feel like I'm so I'm so mad about the things I don't like that I can't enjoy the things that are good.
How
And that's
interesting.
fair.
Yeah, but Drew, does it feel kind of like Nacy's love letter to his, you know, childhood experience with these?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a guy that said, you know, he's famously quoted as saying that when his mom asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up, he said, "I want to be a werewolf." And like, that he went and did it, man.
and he
you
did.
know?
I have to say, although I'm pretty sure that was Scott's response when his parents asked him what he wanted to be. No? Oh.
I said I want to be an accountant.
Oh.
Really?
No,
Well, that's the
By
same.
accountant, you mean
kidding.
globe-trotting assassin.
Math is like my worst subject ever. So no, that's not true.
Hey, is it okay if I jump in here and just and as much as we're raining love on Nashi, and well, we should, in terms of the overall look of the creatures, my favorite one was the mummy.
Oh yeah.
Because why?
Just because it was different, literally.
Oh,
Literally.
really?
I there was something about that face that I found intriguing. Scott's shaking his head, but
I think, as I said before, I think that, none of these monsters, aside from Nashi, who certainly is the lead actor, have any kind of real charisma. It could have been anybody. It could have
I'm not
been
talking
me.
about charisma. I'm just talking
It
about
could-
it had
But
an unusual
to me,
appearance.
now we're on diametrically opposed sides, because I found the mummy to be like the wimpiest of the lot.
God, I'm afraid of our friendship.
Because it
Wimpier
looked
than
like-
Come
Frankenstein?
to an end, just like
I
that. That's
don't
all I'm
know.
doing.
I don't know. Like the Frankenstein in this looks all to me like there was an SNL
Serious.
skit back in the 90s where
Yes.
Phil Hartman played
Yes, yes,
Frankenstein.
yes.
Fire. Yes.
But also, wasn't the mummy supposed to be female?
Well, I've heard that, but it's
What?
played by I think a male actor named Gene Reyes. I can't find much about this person other than that
No.
I think they were Asian, but that's pretty broad.
That's really
Um,
interesting.
And apparently somebody who worked in a number of Spanish movies in the 60s.
See, I had
all
no
we know.
idea, Mary, that was the case, that the mummy.
No, I'd
was
heard that too,
female.
but they referred to it as him or he in at least one scene. But I have read online, so I was expecting to believe it, that the mummy was supposed to be a woman. And
Right.
yet
Well, I wonder if the translation was wrong. If they were using, if in Spanish they were using feminine.
I honestly don't know.
I would love to find it. That's
Something-
really
Yeah, that's
interesting.
another reason why I want to watch find the Spanish one.
While
Yeah.
we're talking about the monsters, something I've always wondered about, and I maybe now I'm just not trying hard enough because we have the internet, but Dracula and Frankenstein are not called Dracula and Frankenstein, even though that's clearly who they're supposed to be.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad.
And
you brought
that is
this up.
so odd.
Yeah,
Copyrights.
Franken.
Well,
Yeah,
I can't
Frankenstein
keep
is called
the,
Frankenstein.
yeah.
Thank you.
Dracula is the funny thing is we can just call him that's the hilarious thing is like even the movie knows that it's bullshitting you when it
Yes.
says the
Yes.
Frankenstein monster
Yes.
and
I just keep
Mummy is
playing
the
the
mummy.
Black Betty meme. Whoa, Black Betty, Frankenstein.
The Frankenstein in this movie too, it takes what was essentially, if I remember correctly, I might be remembering this wrong, but it essentially takes a mistake from the Universal films that was edited out. I can't remember which one. It might have been the Mummy's Ghost.
oh, are
I'm
you
sorry,
talking about
the
the fact that his
Frankenstein's
eyes are
ghost.
closed?
Yes.
Okay, I was curious about
He
that.
looks
So
Yeah,
high.
and that whole storyline was edited out of the Mummy's or Frankenstein's ghost. And so after that movie, though, they kept that in, the whole arms out in front of you as you're walking. and
Yes,
your
that's
eyes are
right.
Frankenstein
slit.
meets the Wolfman, right? Isn't that the
Yeah.
one where Drew will
He was
know?
supposed to be
The,
blind.
the monster was supposed to be
Yeah.
blind.
Right.
The
Very
monster was supposed to be
interesting. That's
blind.
such a wild piece of trivia that is just so like that just sounds like something out of The Unbearable Lightness of Being, that there was this accident in a Universal picture that got continued in another Universal picture and then got picked up by Paul Nashi of all people and put into a 1970 drive-in movie. And so
Is it just me, or does it seem like Frankenstein's supposed to be tall? 'Cause
Yeah,
that's what really
he does
bothered me.
He was way too short.
Yeah, he was so short.
Well,
yes.
it kind of works because like Nashi is stocky.
Yes.
So like,
I
and I
don't-
like the scenes of him and the Wolfman fighting each other. Like
Yes.
they it has a good, like, although not, I think I like the mummy fight better because like the werewolf literally puts the
Oh,
the
that was
mummy
great.
into Yeah,
That
and
was
like
some
burns
crazy
the mummy
visual.
alive.
he throws him into basically the treadmill and
Yeah, he throws
That's
him into
so
the hamster
awesome.
wheel, basically,
Burns him up.
and then
I like
sets
that.
him on fire.
I thought that was
Yeah.
pretty cool, actually.
I
But you know, as
never-
far as the height thing goes,
do that.
anytime, and I really hate to crap on a movie, regardless, but anytime that I can't even pronounce it correctly, Frankenstein.
Yes.
Roxalon.
Just call him
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Say Frankenstein.
But that's the problem, Julia, is you're applying Frankenstein expectations
Oh.
to a Roxalon. It's like,
You order your
two
monster
different
on
people.
Wish.
Frankenstein was only 5'7". There's
Frankenstein is
Yeah.
famously not a tall
You can't-
monster.
exactly. But
Everyone
it does-
knows.
It doesn't
Oh,
help
yeah.
that I'm pretty sure Michael Rennie was relatively tall.
Mm.
And so there are a few scenes in the lab where there was just no way they could create the illusion of height. With,
Well,
really,
with-
really
You
with the
say
monster.
that, except tons and tons of Frankenstein monsters have huge lift boots.
True.
Just
Right,
for that, like,
for sure.
like we don't like.
Right, right.
Well, you know, we
You're
we
so
decided to take all of the parts that were leftover parts, but we
Mhm.
forgot
The
to
boots.
add
The
lift
lift
boots
boots.
to make him
Yeah.
taller.
Well,
Which is
well,
a-
and
like,
and
it's
one
come
wonders
across
if
tons. But again, we're applying Frankenstein ethos and
The-
to Roxalon.
You're right. I'm sorry.
That's supposed to be, believe it or not, there was supposed to be one other monster in this movie. There was supposed to be a golem, and like
Yeah.
I am wondering where they would have found space.
Screen
For-
time. You already
Oh.
don't have time for Dracula to do or say anything. You
Yeah,
know?
Dracula's dispatched so quickly, Jason. I think
Right.
it was well done, but he was pretty ineffective.
and he
Well,
has
he also-
no lines at all in the
He's
movie.
not intelligent. He's basically a zombie. Like,
Yeah.
and why is that? That's because
And he's a coward.
Nashi's right. Nashi's doing his best to get all these characters in here, and maybe it's impossible. Like I have no idea, but
Sure.
but he just isn't. By the way, I wanted to check on that height thing, and you're right. So Christopher Lee, 6'5". All right, Michael Rennie was 6'4". Unbelievable, nearly as tall as Christopher Lee. That is a tall dude. The other thing I wanted to mention about Michael Rennie is that he played Harry Lime in a short-lived television series based on The Third Man, where Harry.
What? I didn't know
Really?
that.
But in the TV series, Harry Lime was changed from the guy who would sell like tainted medicine to become super rich, and he became more like the Pretender. He's just a fixer who handles
Interesting.
things
I'll be
in
darned.
East and West Berlin. So they changed him to what do you call that when it's an anti-hero? There you go.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah. Oh,
so-
interesting. Now I got to look that up.
I know, right? There are all these things like that I haven't seen it yet, by the way.
Okay, all right.
I've only read interviews where he's talking about it. So it could be there were 3 episodes and then they quit.
Yeah. Hope you find it. Let me know. I'll try to look for it too.
We'll
Huh.
watch it on Zoom. We'll just share
I
want
love
to
it.
find that. I want to find the television adaptation of Casablanca.
Yep.
Not the one with David Soul, but the earlier one from the 50s.
Oh, yeah.
So,
But
Oh.
we're off
I know
topic.
we're way far afield.
So,
yeah.
well, I just had something I quickly wanted to touch on. There must have been, at least obviously with the name changes, although one wonder, the names themselves wouldn't have, I don't think at that point would have caused a copyright issue because, Dracula and Frankenstein are names obviously that have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
But I also
Yeah.
noticed that aside from the which I believe they were like asphalt spreaders boots or some kind of specialized boots that Frankenstein's wears. It was some sort of trade boot. But
you mean the original with
yeah, the Universal monster.
yeah.
Huh.
And then this monster also has a complete lack of neck bolts, of course.
Oh,
That's true. I didn't think about that. You're
Yeah.
right. You're
Well,
right.
I love that you said a complete lack. Like it's not partial. Partial lack of. They're not small
Partial.
neck
Neck
bolts.
bolts gone.
I find it
But-
rather curious that they went with the obvious universal look,
Yeah.
and yet felt the need to change the name. I would have done it the other way around.
See, that's the thing that I think it's like Vanilla Ice when he ripped off Queen.
Yeah.
Like, I added another note in there. Like, oh no, we changed the bulbs.
That's-
It's
That's
completely
called
different.
sampling.
Doom, doom, doom,
It's called
Sampling.
sampling.
I prefer to think of the word as a word of homage. I think that's what.
Yes.
Well, speaking of that,
He added an
This-
ice baby.
this
Yeah.
movie So this is a public domain film, and what I find I find that just wild, right? But it means that there's a million versions of this, and I would love to hear, like, for those of you who want to spend 80 or 85 or 90, depending on the version you watch, minutes watching this film, and I really honestly think you should. Truly,
I
I'm not sure
disagree.
what I feel about this movie, but right. And Julia disagrees. But anyway, if you wanted to, so where did you guys watch this movie? Like which version did you watch, and where did you watch it?
I watched the two versions of it myself. I'm sorry. I did the Tubi version, and then I did a YouTube version, and the YouTube version looked
You
beautiful.
watch to be or not to be?
Yeah, nice.
Dun.
I already made that joke once before, and Jason totally groaned at me. So
Oh,
you're welcome.
We could never groan at you. The Tubi version, in my estimation, was just it was a bad copy, and of course it was cropped, it was panned and skinned, as Jason would say.
Yes.
Scanned, but it also had the bloody scenes. And Jason, did you say that it also had more connecting scenes?
Yes, it did. Or unless this was my imagination. And so, like, Julia and I watched a version on YouTube, and the color was gorgeous on it, but the problem was, first of all, the sound was weird, so that every time an English line was about to start, there would be like an eighth of a second of dead air.
Yep.
Which was not the case on the Tubi version.
Right.
But I also believe that there were more connecting scenes that had not been cut on the Tubi version. You had more connecting scenes. Hey, we're gonna go over there, or we're gonna do this thing, like explaining what the next scene was. So you had less of that disorientation that Tony talked about.
Yeah.
But it could also have been my imagination. I because with the subtitles and stuff, you don't get as lost. So I don't know. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I read somewhere online that one of the reasons it's conjectured that the movie is the way it is that they ran out of money, and at one point there's two different directors for this film, because one of them quit, and I haven't found out any reason why they quit, but they quit and they had to get a new director. And apparently there was a long delay between the time that director quit and they found another one. So
really,
who knows what kind of chaos that may have caused from an editing point of view that may have given us at least some of the final product that we see. The other interesting just side effect, side bit of information that I read, again somewhere, I can't substantiate it, but originally, Naschy apparently wanted to cast the American actor Robert Taylor in the Rennie part. But of course what I read about that was they couldn't get him for some reason, but they didn't say the reason. And my suspicion is the reason they couldn't get him is because he died in 1969. He died in June of that year. So that's my suspicion as to why they couldn't get him.
Well, I mean, this is Michael Rennie's last movie. I mean, he dies like shortly after this movie comes out, just rather suddenly. He was like 67 years old or something, and just died.
He still looks really good. He doesn't look like somebody on their last leg.
He died suddenly of an aortic aneurysm. It was a shock, and I was wrong when I said his age. He was 61 when he died. So he's
wow.
Steady on there. All right, Scott, how you feeling?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, look, that's one of those things that can just get you.
Exactly.
So it's just
that's right.
And I have to
just like a silver bullet.
Right.
Yeah.
I have to apologize for going on a little too long about what platform I watched it on, because I know Jason had asked everybody what platform they watched it on, and give anybody else a chance to answer.
Well, I mean, if there's anything to add on that, I was just curious, because I don't even know if there's such a thing as a legitimate version of this movie.
There are.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you first.
We had the same. We had the same discussion with Dracula and Son, where there's a couple of different versions that are out there. I think we had the American version, but apparently the European version is better. I couldn't find any sort of details for this film about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, you could dedicate yourself to years of sleuthing on this.
There are some Paul Naschy collections that came out on DVD, God knows how long ago. And if you can find them, they're pretty expensive.
Do you have this, Drew?
I do not, alas. My upstairs neighbor in my apartment complex does, however.
Interesting.
That is why I know they exist. And yes, I did try to buy them from him, and he declined.
Who the hell is your upstairs neighbor? Why isn't he on the podcast?
Yeah,
That's amazing.
Why are we on, and why isn't he
Jeez.
on or she on? Why are they on?
He is very. His name is Rob. He is very shy, but he is also a horror fan and like me, a Russ Meyer fan. So we have a lot to talk when we meet in the garden courtyard every so often about.
That's
But
fabulous.
Yeah, it's good to have neighbors you get along with. But
Yes.
Yeah.
he did not want to sell me his Paul Naschy box. He likes me quite a bit. He let me borrow it for a long time.
Wow.
He didn't like it enough. He doesn't like me enough to sell it to me.
I'm wondering, Jude, was this movie in that collection?
Yes, that's why I'm bringing it up. It was
Okay.
pretty in depth. Like, it had a lot of it. I am surprised that like Scream Factory or Vinegar Syndrome or one of those hasn't done a Blu-ray release of these, because
There's a
I'm
couple,
referring
Shout.
to our Oracle Wikipedia's.
All hail.
All hail. Oh,
All
yay.
hail.
I get to say all hail with you guys. I always say
Wikipedia-
all hail with you when I'm listening to the podcast.
Yay! Oh no!
Steadily create a god.
Wikipedia says that there is a DVD out there from something called Real Vault, REEL, Real Vault, under the Assignment Terror title. And then there's also a German Blu-ray out there. Now, it doesn't give any details as to the condition of the print, if it's pan and scan or anything like that. But that's the only information I can find.
Tony, what were
Yeah,
you gonna say?
Shout did a couple of Blu-rays of Naschy Blu-rays.
Okay.
They end up being like $40 a piece, but I don't think they.
Does
far
it
as
have
I can
this?
tell, I don't see one with this.
Huh.
There's two Paul Naschy collections that I know of.
Does it have the important question is honestly, as much as I'm beaming about this movie, I don't actually think this is one of the better Hombre Lobo movies. Does it have the werewolf and the Yeti, which might be
Part
my
2
favorite?
does. Part 2 does. And those end up being
Yes.
they end up being about $40 if you look around. But yeah,
I
Shout
might
has
pony
them.
up for the werewolf and the Yeti. I really like that one.
I just realized I have a copy right here of Werewolf and the Vampire Woman, which is
Oh.
another of his,
I love
which
it.
features Werewolf and the Vampire Woman as Naschy as the vampire, and it features the love interest in this movie as the vampire woman in that one. Like the woman who's this is what is her name? Patty Shepard, the one
Yeah.
who's walking on, like, I guess in wherever they are in Germany. I guess they're in Frankfurt or something.
There's a bunch of these on Tubi right now, and the thing, because I've been on a kick of revisiting these lately, even before we were talking about doing this podcast, oddly, and Fury of the Wolfman, which is from 1981, is really fascinating to me, because it's like, this is coming out the same year as The Howling and American Werewolf in London, and here is this Universal monster style
he's gonna keep doing
Wolfman
his
movie.
thing, right?
Yeah, like he's just like, I don't, that's the devotion that this man had to this aesthetic, and I'm there for it.
That's
Can I ask you
interesting.
guys a
It's like-
question? Go ahead, Mary. I'm sorry.
It's the classic popcorn movie. This is why people are still so obsessed with sort of those B movies from the drive-in. I feel like this fits so squarely into that category. And this is a monster kid living out his monster kid fantasies with a production company and funding to boot.
Yeah, which is remarkable. I mean, because that's more than many artists would ever have at their disposal.
That's a
Yeah.
good point.
That's a success.
I wonder if he felt in the long run, if he felt as if he'd accomplished at least some of what he hoped to do.
I don't
You
know.
know?
I would love to read an interview.
Well,
with him.
the movie
wonder.
that he thought was the best movie that he ever made is never been released in English, and it's called The Beast and the I could be getting this wrong, but I believe it is called The Beast and the Magic Sword, and it was filmed in Japan, and it's the Wolfman versus Samurai, which is
Oh, wow.
fascinating to me.
That sounds like fun. That sounds fun.
And I really wish, again, Shout Factory, Vinegar Syndrome, somebody, if you listen to this podcast, release that movie with English subtitles. You have at least one customer right here.
No, we
want
probably
this
pony
movie in
up for a
Spanish,
copy for the
but-
Deep Dark Lounge.
I would love to know more about what went down with Nashi and what he thought. There are interviews with him later, but I haven't read them. So I would love to look into this, and maybe we can come back to it later. Is what were Nashi's reflections, later in life.
Yeah.
That would be really cool. I wanted to ask you guys, this fits firmly into Euro horror, right? And on Twitter, you always have new people coming in every year, and they don't know the difference between different kinds of horror, right? And so anything grainy they'll call exploitation, and anything before 1990 they'll call old, and everything's more complicated than that.
Right.
This is you could call this Euro horror, you call it Euro trash, whatever you want.
Yeah.
But like, I love these things, right? I love like the Nashi stuff, which is its own sort of micro genre, but things like Devil's Nightmare and The Devil's Wedding Night, and anything with the word devil in it that was shot in Spain. Why do we watch Euro horror? Like from all this stuff from this era, like what is it that brings you back to this particular party every time?
Well, from my standpoint, to me, there's always there was, at least as a youngster, always a possibility of just a hint of gore, a hint of sexuality, and something that I couldn't even quite define. It has stood in such contrast to the Universal stuff, which I was, basically raised on, and then the Hammer stuff that I discovered a little bit later and fell in love with. But this particular this particular brand, if you will, always seemed a little more, potentially a little more transgressive, a little more exotic. Does that make sense? And the fact that it didn't even necessarily make as much sense,
To me,
partly because of maybe the translations or whatever, made it strangely appealing.
it's like it's pulpy to me. It's very pulpy, and I think granted, I don't have as much, I think, exposure to the sort of Euro trash genre as I do with other parts of European horror. But to me, this feels like, again, it's like what Dave said, transgressive. It's pulpy, it's gritty, it's rough around the edges, it's schlocky. It's like, it's not meant to be good, and it's not meant to have a point. You know what I mean? At least that's what I see from it. I'm sure Nashi thought that had a very valid point. I'm sure it meant something different to him, or he was trying to tell a different story than what we're consuming. But I think the genre as a whole, it's a lot, to me, it's a lot like I don't know, slashers, like early 2000s slashers that were, didn't really have a moral. They were deliberately over the top in gore and violence and sex and skin and all of that. And I think that's why people come to these kind of movies. They're
Well, I mean, you could even suggest that something that has that appears to have no thesis always has an unspoken thesis of some kind or another, right?
Sure.
It's whatever it is that that is just in the air, that's in the water that the fish are swimming in. So like, Julia responded to what she called misogyny, and I think that might be one of the unspoken themes here. If not misogyny, then there's certainly a
hatred of women.
There's a kink. What did you say?
Hatred of women.
Hatred. There could be, or some kind of a sadistic kink, at least. So that's unspoken, right? It's not one of the actual spoken theses of this film, but if the movie's not about something, it's about what's just in the air. I don't know where to go with that because I haven't really thought about this very much.
You know, this movie, like the one that we did, Dr. Jekyll versus the werewolf,
was
is
a lot rougher than this movie.
that one is kind of icky. Like this one feels very, again, juvenile. That one has a much more gross, I guess, sexuality about it. Like this one, I think Mary used the word pulpy because of the pulpiness of it and the sort of like trappings of a mad scientist's laboratory. It makes it tropey in a way that it's more palatable than it was in that it was in that other film. I don't know enough about Naschy as I do other stuff. Like I would be interested to know if he did have any, like if he was into S&M or anything like that, because there, or if it's just something that you had to do, because a lot, not just these Paul Naschy movies, but European horror films of the time period had a lot of sadistic, sex in
There's
it.
a lot of people chained to walls in these movies.
Yeah, and
what's the
like
Christopher Lee movie? What's the
Yeah.
Christopher Lee movie? It's right there in the title. The whip and something.
Oh, are you thinking
Oh, the
about
whip in the body.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about the torture chamber of Dr. Sadism, which is a fine
Which is a fantastic
Do
title.
You want to know? I have a copy of that downstairs.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Someone gave me in a box set of Christopher Lee stuff. I was reading. I haven't watched it yet, but now I'm probably gonna.
No, actually, truly, it is actually pretty good. It just has a terrible title. It has literally
terribly awesome.
If Christopher Lee wanted to, Christopher Lee can do what he wants.
Steady on, Mary. Steady on. Just be careful there.
He can do what he wants.
Like I kind of wonder if they thought that's what they needed to put into movies to sell them. But there certainly is a lot of that in these movies. And it does make me wonder if Paul Naschy was into S&M, but I also don't like kids. These are exploitation movies. Ultimately, I also sometimes feel like, am I presuming that because they really just were putting in an exploitation element to get it, sold to grindhouses and drive-ins?
That's my own personal
That's-
gut feeling, is that it's more of that. It's more of a marketing thing. And that's also, and I actually really do not like those kinds of scenes. But I will say, it's
I
part
don't
of the,
have a
transgressive
problem
element.
with it, depending on how it's presented. Just
Sure.
like how I don't have a problem with S&M as long as it's safe, sane, and consensual.
Oh yeah,
but,
yeah. No.
But
Well, the consensual is the key in this movie. There is no
Yeah.
consensual.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The other thing is that I think that with most films, aside from films that are sort of standouts, no matter the period that they're made in, and I think that also this is a regional European sort of thing, is that in the 60s and 70s, European cinema is pushing the envelope, as is American cinema, as far as things like nudity and sexuality and things like that. And I think that they specifically were in Europe. Well, I think they're always ahead of the envelope as far as American cinema. But I think that they were especially with an eye, as Dave said, towards the drive-in market and that sort of market. So it's like, okay, well, let's throw more sex and violence in there, and taste in those departments might vary, but I think that that's a quibble when you consider that we just got to get this stuff out there to the next audience. And
sure.
I think that's what was really driving most of this.
Plus we're all uptight Puritans in this country,
Yeah.
and the Europeans know it,
Yes.
know better than us.
Well, I also want to throw out that you can be into something in the movies, and it doesn't mean that you're into it in real life.
Right.
There can be
That's right.
fantasies about violence and fantasies about whatever, and what you want to watch is what you want to watch.
This is all good fodder for discussion. I will say, like, when I'm watching this movie and when I'm watching other films of his, I am totally disinterested with that stuff. I am much more interested in the universal monsterness of it all. Like I could care like if I wanted to see someone, chained to a wall or something, I would just go get a porno film. Like I don't care. Like, you know, when I'm watching a monster movie, I'm there to see monsters, and this movie does deliver very, very firmly on the monster part of things.
No, it does. That's true. I definitely, you know, it's so funny. I think this would go perfectly with like Count Dracula's Great Love, because it'd be so cool to see.
You're
another
really
Paul Nash
pushing for that one.
He really
Well,
is,
it
isn't
just
he? Amazing.
it's just striking me that as I think about like how perfectly it mirrors stuff in this. Anyway,
Well, we're seeing Jason's. It's not people tied up. It's Count Dracula's True Love. That's what I want to see in a movie. I'm just telling you.
yes,
Just coincidentally, this happens to be. You know, I'm just saying.
Only if we can watch the Elvira version.
hell yeah, baby.
Oh,
Yeah, like because like I that movie, like I say that like everybody is going to believe me when they hear me say this, because I've been beaming about Paul Naschy throughout this entire podcast. That movie, Count Dracula's Great Love, is so meandering and so
Yes.
dull to me, and like I it just like, can't we do the Hunchback of the Morgue instead? Like.
Sure. Yeah. I'm trying to think. It's so funny. I was watching like I was on the farm doing a writing retreat, and so I turn on like the only channel that's available, and they started playing Last Train Out, which is this rock and roll song that begins Count Dracula's Great Love. And I knew that movie. And I'm just telling you, that is the most obscure movie to recognize from just a few frames of it. I mean, I've been just warped and cracked by this exercise that we're in right now. Like hosting this show for like 11 years has made me into a different and not altogether better person. And I all right. I wanted to mention really quickly about the needle drops. Scott, you were talking about the music, and
Yes.
it is so funny because 1960. I was thinking about this in comparison to Night of the Living Dead, because Night of the Living Dead used library music, right? And yet it was so perfectly chosen. You know, Romero, right? That's
Mhm.
Romero did such careful work in choosing what music, because he was going to use out of the public domain records that he had, and it works beautifully. Like, just you know, there's so many little pieces that if you think of it, and there are like essays about this already. So I'm not coming up with this on my own, but I've thought about this in the past. And this movie is an example of what everybody else was doing at the period, you know, which is just, I don't know, just run something. Just run something
yeah.
slightly adventurous or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Well, except that, like I said, the incongruity of some of it is like, at least to me, it might
Yeah.
not bother other people, but
Oh no,
But-
I feel a lot of us in Congress, but I'll be honest, Scott, that's kind of what I liked about some of it.
Well,
Well,
that can happen. There can be
it
the
has
irony
a-
effect. Yeah.
I would say it has a certain amount of charm after the fact. But if I'd been watching this as a new film in 1970 and
Well
I'd
said.
seen that, I would have been going, "What the hell?" You know,
Yeah.
it
Well,
just
are we
doesn't.
sure that that was the music that originally played?
Well,
Well,
could
I
it-
don't know the
sometimes,
answer to
sometimes
that
they have
question.
music
I-
that
I-
they lose the rights to.
That's a good
I don't
point.
know the answer to that. That's a
I
really
mean, I
solid
can't
question.
imagine they were playing some popular song that they had to renew the copyright, but could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, again, our the other example, of course, is Night of the Living Dead, which, you know, is in the public domain, and nobody bothered to change the music on that one. So
Yeah.
who knows? But I was just thinking about the fact that both of these are movies where they're just grabbing library. It is cool. Also, I wanted to say the sets. We talked about the lab sets, but the castle that they're filming in, which
Yeah.
is in Spain, it's pretty awesome. I
Mhm.
mean, the Spanish
Yeah.
stuff is really, really cool. I want to go there. Like
Well,
this place where I
Yeah, I wondered where it was. You know, we're so used to seeing, I'm used to seeing matte paintings of castles in the background of a lot of things. And I did a double take because I realized, no, they're actually shooting in a land where you've got castles all over the place.
It
Well,
is a
the
place-
ruins were gorgeous.
Weren't
Yeah,
they,
it's
though?
this place is called the Ermita de San Frutos. It is
What was
a-
the line that she has where she starts to say something and then she just gets so lost by looking at the ruins that she stops in mid-sentence? And Jason and I are both like, hello, we're over here. What was the rest of the sentence? We want to know. And then even the
They
camera
both-
goes,
Paul
even
Nashi
the
does
camera
too.
goes, yeah,
He's
Paul
like-
Nashi starts looking off, and then the camera goes, let's look at what they're looking at. And then we just
Yes.
explore the ruins for a while.
That is so funny. But I mean, you think about like movies, that take place in small town America in this era. They would be like, let's stop and show the Christmas parade for like 5 minutes. I would
Yes.
much rather look at this very cool. It's called the Hermitage of Sant Frutos. It is in Carrascal del Rio, Spain.
Okay.
It is it's amazing. So you can go there. It is a national park. Those ruins
To
still
Cortina Fey, I
stand.
want to go to there.
Yeah, I do. Julia,
I want to
we got to
go.
make this happen, man. We have to go
Mhm.
to Spain. Hey, we should go on a Paul Nashi tour of
Oh my
Spain.
God.
That would be
So-
cool.
I think it's just a horror movie tour of Spain.
Just
like,
a
kind of-
Eurotrash tour.
just,
Yeah.
Eurotrash tour of Spain.
I'll tell you what I thought of when I saw those ruins. I thought immediately of the very first, is it called Tombs of the Blind Dead?
Oh.
Yeah, I
yeah.
haven't seen that in a super long time.
It reminded me of that because that movie I think that movie takes place in Spain, and I don't know
Yeah,
if it's a Spanish production,
movie.
but it reminded me of that.
Yeah,
Anyway.
filmed there. Who knows if it's supposed to be Spain? But
Yep.
a lot of them are filmed there. That's true.
Anyway,
Yeah,
Jason, years back, like before in 2016, before the pandemic and before Trump and before all of that stuff that's consumed
back
the
in a
last
time thousands of years ago.
and a more innocent time, I was
Yes.
in Spain on tour with Jamie's band Danger Cakes, and
I love it.
we went up into like the mountain, like they played all these gigs up in the mountains of Spain, and
Oh
there
my
are
God.
to-
If Jamie wasn't
tons-
already the coolest person I know, she's officially the coolest person I know now.
Yeah, I know.
That's awesome.
She is indeed very cool. But
we agree.
there are like we first of all, like all the bands that they had hired for this festival, like we stayed in a castle, and like
wow.
all of these mountain villages looked like the like some gothic horror film should be taking place in them. Like like even though you were in Spain, like I swear you felt like you were in Transylvania or something. It was so crazy and beautiful, but like it would be I will be on my deathbed, and one of the things I will remember is like there was a point where Jamie's band was playing in this town square, and it's all cobblestones, and like the last place you would expect, and the one like rockabilly chick apparently in this like this grouping of mountain villages like came up and started like dancing in front of everybody to Jamie's
Aw.
band, and like they were like, oh yeah, she's been waiting around for weeks and this is all she could talk about. And but like you would go nuts. Like I thought about you a lot when I was in these studies, like because like I was like, who would love this? Jason.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's the kindest thing that you would be thinking. But you're totally right. I mean, I'm a fetishist.
I'm nicer than I let on.
You don't even have to protest. I completely. That is so great. Yeah. No, I do want to go back and see a bunch of old castles in Spain. I mean, absolutely. It would be cool to do a Eurotrash, or a Euro horror tour of locations and just say, hey, this is where they filmed,
It's like the Sound of Music tour, but for like Hammer
right
fans.
for Torture Chamber of Dr. Sadism. Yes. Yeah. I anytime I hear, for some reason, that in another world, another time, in an age of wonder keeps popping through my head,
Yes.
which is like the what was that? Was that the opening of what was that? The Dark Crystal, I guess.
God.
Okay.
Oh,
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
thinking, Jason, when you do your horror tour of Spain, you really need to check out at least some area that they would have used in Horror Express.
Oh, for sure.
Largely
Oh,
takes
we-
place inside the train, but there are a
Yes.
few
Yes.
exteriors.
We should
Yeah.
do Horror Express. That's a
You
great
should.
move.
It's another
That's a
public
bit-
domain movie, actually. yeah.
Another fantastic
Yeah.
public domain movie that should absolutely not be public domain because it's a good movie.
And I
I-
think
We really love it. We really truly do.
I think
that's
that's a
wonderful.
Spanish production, isn't it?
Well,
movie?
it was certainly filmed there. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know who the production company was.
It's
but-
got a hell of a cast. I mean, with
Yeah.
Kelly Savalas and
Yes.
Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and everybody.
And yet another loose adaptation of Who Goes There as well.
Yeah.
so-
I hadn't thought about
Yeah,
that.
Absolutely.
Oh, you know
Anything
what?
that
That's a good way to
takes
put
place
it.
On a train. I love a transportation horror movie.
Yes.
For sure.
Trains,
Yes.
planes, and automobiles. I feel like that should be its own genre.
See, you could
Love
do a
genre.
series. You could do a series of episodes on that of like
Could.
of transportation bound horror.
Yeah.
Ooh, here,
Snakes
here.
on a plane.
So what
Yep.
you're saying is this movie needed a train.
I think so. I think that would have fixed everything.
I think
Honestly,
every movie
the
can be
trains are
Oh, I
good
improved by
forgot we're
train
discussing a
sequence.
movie right now. Gosh, what is wrong with me? We need to get back on track. God.
Instead of blowing up the castle, the Wolfman should have taken his girlfriend and gone on a long train trip.
Yep.
And said, "I just saved the world, y'all. Peace out." You
Time to
know,
go to
when our-
Siberia on the Orient Express.
When
yeah.
our first
Yeah, yeah.
child was tiny, we watched the Universal movies together, and she was so just enraptured by the Romani girl and Lawrence Talbot just riding around the countryside on their little carriage as they are in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. That was her favorite part. Was
Oh,
I have yet to see a movie called Train Wolf, so there you go. I haven't.
Or
Maybe it exists, but
you have
if
Train
it
Wolf
doesn't,
or Wolf Train.
Wolf
Yes.
Train, either one.
oh.
Yeah.
I'm going off the rails with this werewolf train.
Once
Oh,
again,
really right.
another
Lycan
another
train.
possibility for Lava Shark.
There you
Yeah,
go.
yes.
We
Do you
still
know
need
what?
Chupa Cornbra.
There
Yeah,
are
that's true.
Chupacombra. Is that what you said?
That's
No,
the thing that
stop.
we've
No,
been.
no.
Never mind.
We don't want to
Okay.
go off on that tangent.
Yeah, that's true. We'll some other time.
I
Let's
just
say
wanted to
we have a
mention.
short we wanted to make, like a little 10-minute piece we wanted to make for a couple of years now. We haven't been able to get around to it. So
There's no time like the
Yeah.
present.
Haven't
just
been
set
able
yourself
to get around
A
to it.
deadline for by Labor Day. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have this darn
Yeah.
thing done.
Jason,
The
what's your
president has
favorite
be
thing
shot
to
in a
say?
cornfield at night. So
Good luck with
Jason's
that.
favorite thing to say is argue for your limitations and they're yours.
Yeah, that's
oh
right. That's
man,
something I tell my children, and
And
when they
me.
start saying I can't do it, I'll say, argue for your limitations and they're yours. I did not invent that. That came from
Yes,
one
but
of-
you own it now.
Thank you. That came from one of those. That might have been in Jonathan Livingston's sequel. I actually don't know, but
I love it.
yeah. Curiously enough, I just wanted to mention before we wrap up, there were 2 other Dracula versus Frankenstein movies in like 3 years. So it's super confusing if you are a horror fan trying to suss out which one you're watching. We've been talking about the movie, obviously, with Paul Naschy, written by Paul Naschy and directed by 2 people nobody remembers. That's this one. That's this one. However, there is an Al Adams. Al Adamson's an American. He made one called Dracula versus Frankenstein that has its own fairly well-known cast, including Lon Chaney Jr. It is famously worse than this movie.
Oh, yes.
Oh dear, yes.
and we haven't watched it. I'd be interested in watching it. I haven't watched it since I was a kid, but it's actually not all that hard to get your hands on. And then there's yet another one by Jess Franco. And I gotta see that because he is my favorite Spanish horror director of this mid-century
I wasn't
era.
even aware of that.
I wasn't
I-
either,
I-
Scott. That's a new one for me. Wow. we need to
19
break it down.
So I only learned about this today. So I'm not like a deep Franco file
Yeah.
in this sense. But he
Franco
made-
file.
I do not think
That's
that word
awesome.
means what you think it means.
Exactly.
but he did a Dracula versus Frankenstein in 1972, and I gotta see that. That sounds
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so there you go. So over the next few weeks, between other stuff that probably is way more important, I will see if I can dig up both of those movies.
If you find that, And
I
you
just
have a
found
link
it.
Oh, you did.
Did
Okay, all right.
share the link with us. Share the link with us.
I will.
Not in the Zoom here because we'll lose it the moment.
Exactly. No, I will. I will.
In our shared chat. Yeah.
Yep.
Man, I'm gonna play that. Yeah.
Well, be careful what you ask for.
I have a pretty good idea of what I'm asking for. Yeah. All right. Let's get our final thoughts. And feel free to mention anything that you feel like we didn't slow down to pay attention to. I'm totally ready to admit that I may not have hit every possible theme or topic. So all right. So same order: Drew, Mary, Tony, Scott, Julia, David, and then we'll go to endorsements.
First
Drew.
of all, this is the correct Dracula versus Frankenstein to watch. However, it does not actually feature a Dracula fighting a Frankenstein. What it does feature is a werewolf beating up a mummy and then beating up a Frankenstein. And I think that's worth more. I love this movie. I again, unironically, unabashedly, I'm wearing my enthusiasm on my sleeve here. Which, as discussed when we did just a few weeks ago, did Captain Kronos, is kind of a vulnerable act. But I am so glad that we had this discussion tonight, because I am grinning from ear to ear that I got to talk about this glorious B movie with this delightful group of people. So I will ramble no more and turn it over to Mary.
Wonderful.
All I have to say is go buy some Jiffy Pop and have a couple of friends over, bring tequila and have a grand old time, because this is absolutely a popcorn movie. It is not good, but it is what it is. It's a fun one that you would watch at a drive-in. And go into it with both eyes open, but know that you're not getting the kind of art that you're getting is pulpy and schlocky, but very, very fun, and of course features monsters fighting, and we all love that.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, I mean, I think I perhaps like discussing this movie more than I liked watching it. Yeah, I've watched it twice. It is really entertaining, and I have to admit that the monster fighting is bonkers in a way that's pure entertainment. The mummy fight, Drew, I'm glad you brought that back up, because that was one thing I had to rewind and realize and just go, that happened. That's happening. That's a way. That's a way a werewolf could dispatch a mummy.
It is a way.
It was
And a
something
giant
else.
wooden hamster wheel on fire. Yes.
It's something else. I mean, and there's a lot of entertainment value in this movie. It's definitely not a perfect movie. I watched it twice over 2 consecutive nights because I wanted to watch each version that we had access to.
Mm-hmm.
And each had its own kind of bits. So it would be interesting to see the definitive cut in Spanish, to see if maybe what we have just is inferior to what was actually released. As intended. I don't know. But I mean, Nashi's great in it, and I think I sit kind of in the middle as far as like, I definitely don't hate the movie, but I don't know how often I would revisit it. By the way, I will mention before endorsements though, that Mondo Macabro released the Beast and the Sword. So you can find that, and there's also Shout Factory did release 2 different Paul Naschy Blu-ray set, so you can get that. And also I think there's a chance I stumbled across the that movie that Mary was looking at, possibly, which might be called Scalps. So
Tony is our practical media detective tonight. That's great work.
Great.
That's something I try to do often. I still am looking. I have like 4 pieces of media that I'm still looking for in my own media search that I haven't found. But usually I'm pretty good.
Tony's not just the media detective for us. He's the media. He used to be, at least. Maybe he probably is again, the media detective for the Alamo Draft House as well.
Oh.
Here, bravo.
Sometimes, I mean, there's some people there who have even deeper. I mean, now that they have AGFA, I'm low on the media detective for them because there's.
But you have
amazing
definitely
people there.
curated some interesting collections for them.
That's true. That's true. I will take that. But yeah, I try to I try to find stuff like this. So but anyway, but yeah, this was it was great hanging out with everybody, and I think that is worth watching a movie, even a flawed movie. But again, I would rather watch a flawed movie that's entertaining and cool and outsider than I would a blockbuster that has no heart. And so
I agree with you
I'll
completely.
go
I
back
agree.
every time.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I
Yep.
enjoyed that aspect of this.
Yep.
That's wonderful. Thank you for saying that. And that's so true. People are always like, "Hey, did you see this? Did you see that?" And I'm like, I understand that like 60% of the stuff that I watch is 50 years old for no reason whatsoever.
Yes.
I'm just always in a weird place.
That's cute how you said 50 years old as if everything you watch isn't from the 60s.
Is that am I wrong about that? So you're
That's
saying
more
it's
that's
60
more
years
than
old?
50 years old.
Fair.
Yeah.
Oh, see, boy, that's
It's
terrible.
okay. It's all right. It's okay.
I'm in a deep depression.
I'm sorry.
That's what- we talk often about how Jason doesn't always understand how time works.
Yeah.
It's
So
true. I always
doesn't.
overestimate or underestimate. And I'll say,
He
"Well,
always
that's-
overestimates when it comes to my age and something
That
that
is
would
not-
age me.
well, I
That is
still
not
remember
true.
the call. I remember the conversation we had where you were professing that 20 years was not a very long time, and yes, it is.
I still think that. I certainly 10 years is not a long time. If somebody's like, "Hey, it's time to reboot this," and the last version is like less than 10 years ago. I'm like, we're still like probably paying off the first one, But okay, we're not talking about me. Scott, what are your final thoughts about watching this crazy movie?
Well, as others have already said, it's if you've never seen it before, I'd recommend it. Like I said, if you're familiar with the Universal films of the 30s and especially the 40s, and especially those House of Monster Rally films, it's worth seeing. It's far from perfect, obviously, as discussed, but it's worth seeing because 10-year-old me would have, as I said, this is a better monster fight movie than Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. So it's worth it just for that. I wish I could say it was better than it is, but it is what it is.
I think that's exactly right, and I think people can get a good idea out of that. Julia, you liked it less than that.
You sounded so resigned, Julia. No, I will say that I was telling the guys before we started recording that I have a very selective memory and I kind of forget everything I don't like. So the good news is that I'll probably forget this movie like tomorrow, but I'm not going to forget this awesome discussion with you guys. So I'll be like thinking, gosh, what was that movie that we talked about with the monster where we were laughing and this was but I won't remember what the movie was. So that's the good news about this movie for me.
That's very sweet.
That makes me very happy. David, what about you?
Well, I enjoy this movie more than I thought I would. And I want to thank you for forcing me to just sit down and pay attention to it, not once, but twice. And that 60s vibe, that's a sweet spot for me. I wish the makeup had been better. The version I did watch on YouTube, quite frankly, showed some absolutely beautiful color and some, from time to time, some really inventive staging. And so it was obvious to me that at least occasionally parts of the movie were in the hands of somebody who really knew what the hell they were doing. And so it in the end, it gets a much higher rating for me than I thought it would. So I recommend it, if for nothing else, just to see monsters beating the hell out of monsters. And it's, as we say, the final Michael Rennie film. So watch it just for that.
Does Monster Movie Happy Hour say check it out?
We do.
They do. I hear Mary say that every time.
Yes.
Yes.
If only just to drive Scott just a tiny bit more crazy.
We're waiting for Joe Bob Briggs to come down on us,
That's right.
I think Joe Bob
Handful
Briggs
of
would be
lawyers.
flattered.
If they ever send us a cease and desist, I'll frame it and put it on my wall.
There you go.
There we go.
I don't speak for Joe Bob Briggs, but I speak on behalf of Texas. You are allowed.
Man, Drew, I wish you spoke on behalf of Texas.
Oh,
Wouldn't that
no
be nice?
kidding.
Yeah. You know, when we were up at the not to go dark here, but when we were up in the Capitol, like I was like 10 times Texas. I wore my cowboy boots, I wore my bolo tie, I wore my cowboy hat, because I was like,
That's awesome.
God damn it. Like I have to show the world that not all rednecks are bad.
Well, that's one of the things I appreciate about Joe Bob Briggs. I mean, I was just listening. I was playing for Julia. His whole semi rant about the anti-trans bills in North
Yes.
Carolina.
Oh yeah.
This is
Yeah.
from 2 years ago.
Yep.
And he had this he's just such a wonderful way of communicating with good old boys like me, like a country song would say, and he can talk about, he says Southern men are either Andy or Barney at any given moment, where either the soft-spoken and wise Sheriff Andy Taylor, or we're the doofus and dangerous, deluded Barney, and we vacillate, and we need to be told when we're vacillating in the wrong direction. And I thought that was such a wonderful and wise and compassionate way of talking to his audience, right? And I don't know, I've always just really been touched by that guy. So
one thing I really admire about him too, especially in recent years, is that he's someone who I think has gone through some substantial change in opinion.
Yeah.
And I think you get to see that over the past couple of years. And I don't think that he's one of those people who I don't think tries to justify his opinions of the past or who he was, but is sort of constantly growing. And I think that that's really admirable. And I don't think you see that often. I think that there's a lot of people who say, oh, they're old, they're set in their ways. And I think that people like Joe Bob Briggs, disprove that myth. And he does it in a way that's so relatable and so funny and so accessible. And he's doing it as a white dude, and this is exactly what white dudes should be doing. I think that people should be more outspoken like him. So yeah, I'm with you, Jason. I really admire.
Yeah, he shows us how to be. I admire it a lot. Anyway, gosh, I guess that left me. I got nothing else to add. You guys hit it all. So let's get to our endorsements. I want to hear, and we will limit it to one, or else we'll be here for another 45 minutes. So let's hit the one thing that you should listen to or watch this week, and in your mind dedicate it to the human who is recommending it to you right now. So starting with you, Mr. Drew, what would that be?
Well, because we only have one, I have to go dark and go selfish and say, humans who are listening to this podcast, you need to stop listening to the podcast soon. When the podcast episode is over, you need to stay on your computer or other internet receptacle. You need to go to the Ringo Awards website. You need to nominate me for Best Writer. You need to nominate Halloween Man for Best Webcomic. You need to also nominate Halloween Man for Best Hero. And you need to nominate Global Comics for Best Publisher. Yeah, that. Do it.
You control us.
Yes.
I love it. I've actually done it. FYI, I did all the things you said.
And you feel like a better person, don't you?
I do. I get up every morning and I say, I have a new lease on life.
Yes.
We're not your enemies. We're just people you control.
Yeah. But your passion will set you free.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Excellent. So yes, nominate Drew. He's on a full campaign right now. So nominate Drew for the Ringo Awards. Do it.
You can't see me right now, but I'm doing Richard Nixon peace sign fingers.
Oh no.
I don't know if that always works out as well as one might hope. But you get a good plane. So Mary, what about you?
I have been on an audiobook kick lately, and the one that I am listening to right now that I highly recommend to any horror lovers out there is called Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and it takes place in the 1950s in Mexico, and I will leave it there. It is a beautifully written book, a fascinating story, and I've really enjoyed listening to it. So I'm listening to it on Audible, and I highly recommend it.
We also listened to it on Audible, and it was really good.
Really,
Yeah,
did you like it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We'll
I'm
talk about the end when you're done.
yeah.
Because
I'm
I love
excited
it.
to finish it.
I love it. I have thoughts, but I don't want to spoil anything. So okay. So Mexican Gothic. Tony, what about you?
While I was sick, I binged Atlanta, which is great, and I read Fist of the North Star and Kamen Rider manga. But the one I'm going to really endorse is The 10th Victim, which I endorsed to Jason, and it is quite the extremely mod
Holy
Italian
shit,
movie. Somewhere between Running Man and Most Dangerous Game. And it's quite the movie. if you understand our proclivity for Italian for Eurotrash, I think you'll dig on this a lot. Like it's also just a bonkers movie where you sign up, victims and hunters sign up in this grand database and plot to kill each other. You're either hunter or a killer, and Ursula Andress is in it. It's great, and it also has a comic book. I just love also that they go to repossess one of the main characters' apartment, his stuff in his apartment, and they're taking away this bookshelf full of comics and fumetti. And his girlfriend at the time goes, "Not the classics." As they're taking away all the comics, and I lost it. But it is a bonkers super mod movie full of loungy music, and it had all the Eurotrash I wanted at the time.
It's
and I'm
one
glad
of the
I came
most
across
beautiful
it.
movies I've ever seen. It is just 1965 color. Marcello Mastroianni in a blonde hairdo for reasons, and Ursula Andress and
It's-
mod clothes. I mean, it's
Yeah. And you can watch it. I think Prime, if I'm not mistaken, has the subtitled version, so you can watch it in Italian. And you said you watched it on Tubi, right?
I watched it on
Jason?
Plex. It's probably also on
Plex.
Tubi.
Oh,
yeah.
Plex has the dub version. I thought it was cool that you could watch the Italian version, because often we only get the dubs of Eurotrash movies, which is fine and fun and cool. But I was kind of impressed that we got the Italian version, which is always cool for me.
Sweet. Thank you very much. I'm so glad you brought that movie up, because I'd never heard of it before, and now I have. So my week.
Good old Prime, like when it decides to work its magic and go, "Hey Tony, this is the stuff you dig, right?" It's right. A lot of times it is. I'm like, I'm with you, Prime. Thank you.
That's how I'm about Netflix. I'll just be like, okay, what do you want me to watch today, Netflix? Yes, good choice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Our Netflix never, I don't know. I've fallen out. Our relationship is contentious.
Complicated is complicated.
Yeah, Prime is usually like, "Oh, how about a week full of pirate movies? Thanks, Prime." Yeah, that's how it is, And this was no exception. How about this really weird mod hunter killer game? All right, what else you got? And it works really well for me.
Cool.
Awesome. Scott, what about you? What do you have?
Well, I was at the earlier this week. I was at our local used bookstore, and going through the usual sections that I go through, I discovered a book that I was shocked to see that I had not discovered when it was brand new, which was in 2010. And so it's this book about the production of and all of the sociological effect of the movie, which we mentioned earlier, Night of the Living Dead. The author's name is Joe Kane. Here's the book. And I've been reading it. And I don't know how, it's the kind of thing that when it was new, I would have been interested in, but hadn't heard of before. Anyway, it's been a very interesting read and enlightening. And I've learned things about the production of the film and the artists involved, things that I didn't know before. So just on that fact alone, it's been worth reading.
That sounds great. And speaking as a publisher, you'd be surprised how difficult it is to get your books in front of people who probably would like them. I mean, that's the whole publishing challenge in a nutshell.
It's one of the delights of course, going to, and I'm sure most people here know the same thing, of going to a used bookstore and discovering something that appeals absolutely to you and you've never heard of it before. Even though it's, in this case, a decade old, but sometimes, 30 or 40 years old. That's always a delight.
Julia, what about you?
Oh my gosh, I'm going mainstream. John Wick 4, you guys. It's so good. So good. It's like one of the best action movies I've ever seen. It is gorgeous, creative. All of the fight choreography is just brilliant. Yes, I am such a fan, and I like the other three.
I
but this is
don't
my
know
favorite.
though. Does Keanu Reeves light a mummy on fire?
I will make the argument that that Assignment Terror and John Wick 4 have a lot of similarities, and one of them
What?
is
No.
yes. Hear me out. I know you don't have to, but just bear with me for just like 8 seconds. We came out of that movie on Friday, and I said, it's like going to a ballet. There's really we're just here sitting in these chairs, and for 90 minutes, or in that case more like 3 hours, there's just one balletic performance after another, loosely strung together by stuff, but really you're there to watch this performance. And it goes from beginning to end, and you're done. And what was it for? It was for going, that was really cool. And it's the same thing. What is the purpose of Assignment Terror? It's monster mash, right? And so those are.
I think that
serve
John Wick 4 achieved its assignment much better than Assignment Terror did. That's all I'm have to say about that. But I loved it.
Okay,
That may
let me
be the
ask you
case.
one question about it.
Mhm.
So I would assume, although it's not necessary, that you've seen the previous 3 films.
I did. I actually binge watched them. I actually endorsed them on another podcast because I binge watched.
And would you say that it is in fact the best of
I think it's the best one.
series?
Oh,
Okay.
wow. Really?
There's a couple of film critics that I follow on Instagram who are very acerbic when it comes to recommending films, and they gave this a 5 out of 5 stars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's
My
just
goodness.
so
Huh.
good. It looks expensive, but apparently it's actually cheaper than a lot of other action movies. But it's just so creative, and the talent is amazing. They've got like these, martial arts movie stars that are amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this to be snarky or sound punk rock or whatever, but I couldn't make it all the way through the first John Wick, and I have never watched any of the other ones.
I am
That
Yeah.
disappoints me, Drew.
I'm a
So bad
hard
to
sell.
me.
I'm a hard sell when it comes to modern action movies, just because I kind of roll my eyes at a lot of it. The John Wick movies are one of those ones where I liked it the whole time, but it was but Keanu was the threat. Keanu was the hook, and then the story and everything else.
I am
movie.
I am legitimately happy for his comeback. Don't get me wrong. I know we wouldn't have gotten a third Bill and Ted without John Wick. So, but I perhaps I should revisit the movie at another time. But Jamie and I tried to watch it together, and it was after. Perhaps it was just overhyped because this was about a year after the first one was out. And everybody was like, "Oh, you have to watch this movie. You have to watch this movie." So we sat down to watch it. We ordered a pizza with some dessert and everything, and we were gonna make a date night out of it, but at home. And we were about halfway through it. I was like, "Do you care about anything that's going on?" And she was like, "No." And I was like, "Yeah, me either." So I forget what we watched instead.
This
but
one's worth watching in the theater. It's just good looking. It's really, Keanu's great, but he's not the hook of this film. It really isn't. It's just there's so much amazing action and amazing great fights.
The weird thing is Jamie is Jamie, and we haven't really talked about it recent enough, but I need to revisit why she didn't particularly connect with it. I am not an action fan, even though they're I feel like action and horror are often related. I am not an action fan first and foremost, but if there's a gore factor to it, sometimes I will connect with it. I don't know. Perhaps I should revisit it. I probably will. I'll give most movies at least two viewings before I complete.
Have to. I mean, there's really
no. They're very popular, so obviously they're popular for a reason.
Well, we've spent enough time on it, but I recommend this one.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that we had that discussion. All right. So that was Julia. Julia was John Wick 4. David, what about you?
Yes. Making Apes, the artist who changed film. just watched it recently on Amazon Prime. It's from 2020, and essentially it's the documentary built primarily around and from the perspective of Tom Berman, the makeup man, and how 50 some years ago he worked with a veteran makeup man, John Chambers, to create the apes for Planet of the Apes. Highly recommended. Highly recommended. If for no other reason, the fact that you get to see Edward G. Robinson doing a screen test in the early incarnation of the makeup, which looks absolutely nothing like what you will later see in the other characters. So yeah, highly recommended. Making Apes, the artist who changed film.
That sounds fantastic. And isn't it funny how, Roddy McDowell's on the cover of that book, and I'm sorry, on the film, and you can always recognize the actors under the makeup.
Yeah,
and
yes,
that has just always just amazed me.
Yep, I agree.
All right, my endorsement is something I posted on Twitter earlier in the week, and you can find it if you look on YouTube, and it is a sketch on SCTV called Rome Italian Style, where they basically, the gang at SCTV tried to do a fake. Well, they did perfectly. It's a fake Eurotrash movie, with dubbed voices, and Catherine O'Hara and Joe Flaherty basically play characters in a weird Italian thriller that makes no sense, and there's moments of just weird Art Deco stuff, and
You had me at Catherine O'Hara.
crazy lounge music. I mean, it's just one of the most wonderful things I've ever seen. So Julia, I'll play it for you, and it'll blow you away. And
I love her.
and the more you've seen trashy Italian horror movies, the better this sketch gets.
Oh,
You
boy.
can find it on YouTube in the middle of they have the whole episode of SCTV. So you got to jog forward to like 10 minutes in to get to the sketch. It doesn't matter because SCTV is good. So you can just watch the episode. That's my endorsement is not Love Italian Style. Rome Italian Style on SCTV. There we go. That is it.
Aw, darn, that's the end.
Darn, it's approximately Tuesday morning now. We've been
Yeah. Right. For them it is.
Monday morning, right?
Yes, it is Monday morning, but
Okay.
it feels
There
like
was
I've been
I when we were having the Google chat, and when y'all were talking about how we were going to keep this from going long, I literally did not comment on that because I knew there was no way in hell this
No
wasn't going
earthly
to get
possibility.
yeah.
so fair. But this has been super fun. I'm so happy that we had this conversation, and I'm touched that as we move towards our 400th episode, I'm touched that you guys would join us, and it just I don't know. I think everybody feels this way. We consider you true friends, and we can't wait to see all of you in person sometime.
Yes.
And so that's it. Thanks. Does anybody, before I kill this thing, if anybody wants to say anything, speak now or forever hold your peace.
We love you guys.
Oh, we love you.
Yes, it was so delightful.
You guys are, I think collectively, it's such a joy to call you friends, but also when I need comfort, I always go to Castle of Horror. And it's nice to hear your voices.
Thanks.
And it's nice to talk to you in person, face to face.
That's I have tears in my eyes. So okay, everybody have a lovely evening, and we'll talk soon. Let's do this again sooner rather than later. It doesn't have to be an every 3 years thing. We can actually just literally do it whenever the hell we want. So
Sure.
all right.
Sure.
Adios, my friend.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.